Picture this. You wake up on a Monday morning, drag yourself to the gas station, and you see a number on that pump that stops you cold. Not because it is high, because it is higher than yesterday, and yesterday it was higher than the day before, and nobody on the news is giving you a straight answer about when it stops. That is not a hypothetical. That is exactly what is happening right now across America. Gas prices have crossed $3.94 a gallon on the national average, and they are still moving. And the reason they are moving sits in a narrow strip of water on the other side of the world that most Americans could not find on a map 6 months ago. The Strait of Hormuz, a waterway so small you can almost see across it. A waterway so powerful that when it chokes, your wallet feels it within days. And right now, it is not just choking. It is locked in the middle of the most dangerous standoff we have seen in years. Because Donald Trump just gave Iran a 48-hour ultimatum. He said fully open the Strait of Hormuz or the United States will hit and obliterate Iranian power plants, starting with the biggest one first. Those were his exact words on Truth Social. Not a press conference, not a carefully worded diplomatic statement. A post on social media that sent oil markets, shipping companies, and governments scrambling within minutes. And Iran did not go quiet. Iran fired back with a warning of its own, saying that if their energy infrastructure is touched, every single American and Israeli energy facility in the region becomes a target. Desalination plants, power grids, everything. So here we are. The clock ran out. The 48 hours are gone, and the world is sitting in that exact moment between the ultimatum and whatever comes next. Welcome to Unlocked History Hub. Stay with me because what happened in the last 72 hours is about to affect your gas prices, your grocery bill, and whether the Federal Reserve can cut interest rates this year. This is bigger than a Middle East story. This is an American story. And I am going to break it down in a way that actually makes sense. Let me take you back to where this all started because you cannot understand the ultimatum without understanding the 4 weeks that led up to it. On February 28th, the United States and Israel launched coordinated strikes against Iran. The operation was called Epic Fury. It was not a small skirmish. It was a full military campaign involving stealth aircraft, precision-guided munitions, and naval deployments across the Persian Gulf. Iran retaliated almost immediately with ballistic missiles, drones, and attacks on Gulf infrastructure. Within days, shipping through the Strait of Hormuz had essentially stopped, not because anyone officially closed it, because no captain, no insurance company, and no shipping firm was willing to take the risk of sailing a tanker through a waterway where missiles and naval mines were being deployed. The practical effect was a blockade, and when a fifth of the world's oil stops moving, markets do not wait for official announcements. They move on fear. Brent crude surged more than 25% in the first days of the conflict. That number has kept climbing ever since. Now think about what that actually means for you sitting in America. The IMF had projected global growth at 3.3% for 2026 before this started. Goldman Sachs had already warned that if oil prices stayed elevated, U.S. consumer inflation could rise from 2.4% to 3% or higher by year-end. Janet Yellen, who served as Treasury Secretary, said the conflict puts the Federal Reserve even more on hold. Translation: interest rate cuts that Americans were hoping for this year are now in serious jeopardy. If rates stay high, mortgages stay expensive, car loans stay expensive, credit card debt stays expensive. This is not an abstract economic argument. It is money directly out of your pocket every single month. And here is where it gets even more layered. Iran is not fighting this war the same way America is fighting it. The United States is striking military targets, nuclear facilities, naval assets. Iran is fighting economically. The World Economic Forum put it plainly. Iran, unable to match the U.S. and Israel militarily, is internalizing the costs of war by targeting energy, shipping, and civilian infrastructure. The logic is simple, and it is working. Every barrel that does not move through Hormuz raises prices for countries that depend on Gulf oil. Every price spike adds pressure on governments to demand a ceasefire. Every gallon you pay more at the pump is, in a twisted way, part of Iran's strategy. They are making the cost of this war global so that global pressure builds on Washington. And it is building. Spain's Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez went on record saying the world should not pay the consequences of this war. He demanded the strait be opened. European economies are already feeling it. Germany saw gasoline and diesel prices jump by double digits in a single week. Airlines across Asia, Australia, and Scandinavia have hiked ticket prices blaming fuel costs. Qatar, which supplies 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas, had to suspend LNG production after an Iranian drone attack on March 2nd. LNG prices globally shot up nearly 60% since the war began. That hits power generation, that hits heating, that hits industrial production, and all of it eventually hits price tags in stores. Now let me tell you something that I think is genuinely underreported in the mainstream conversation. This war has created what the International Energy Agency called the greatest global energy security challenge in history. Those are not my words. That is the IEA, the organization specifically designed to track global energy threats. And they use the word greatest. Not significant, not serious, greatest. In history, that context should be everywhere. It is not. And that absence of context is exactly why so many Americans feel blindsided when they see those pump numbers. Let me take you around the world for a moment because the damage from this conflict is not evenly distributed. Asia is getting hit the hardest. About 84% of the crude oil that moved through Hormuz in 2024 was bound for Asia. China, India, Japan, and South Korea together accounted for nearly 70% of those shipments. Japan imports 90% of its energy. South Korea's semiconductor industry, the industry that makes the chips inside your phone, your laptop, your car, runs on energy from the Gulf. When that energy supply becomes uncertain, semiconductor production costs rise. When production costs rise, your next electronics purchase gets more expensive. The ripple effect is not theoretical. It is already moving through supply chains right now. India is in a particularly difficult position. The country imports more than 80% of its crude oil. Over 400,000 metric tons of basmati rice grown for export are sitting stuck at Indian ports because shipping lanes through the Middle East are too dangerous or too expensive to navigate. The rupee has come under pressure. Inflation is rising. Bangladesh declared a near-fuel emergency with long queues at petrol stations and the government rationing fuel supplies. Pakistan announced emergency austerity measures, including a 4-day work week for government offices. The Philippines saw its currency hit a record low. These are not small countries with small economies. These are hundreds of millions of people absorbing a shock from a war they did not start and cannot stop. Now back to Trump and the ultimatum. Because here is something I find genuinely fascinating about the political moment we are in. Less than 24 hours before Trump posted that Truth Social ultimatum threatening to obliterate Iranian power plants, he was publicly suggesting he might wind down the war without resolving the Hormuz closure. He was talking about an exit. And then something shifted. Within a single day, the tone went from winding down to obliterate. That is a dramatic reversal, and it tells you something important. The Strait of Hormuz has become the issue Trump cannot walk away from, because if he ends this war without reopening Hormuz, the gas prices stay high. And high gas prices going into midterm elections are politically toxic for any president. He knows it, his advisors know it, the markets know it. Iran knows it too. And that is why their response was calculated, not panicked. The Iranian parliament speaker fired back with threats of his own. The Iranian military issued statements warning that all U.S. and Israeli energy infrastructure in the region would be targeted if Iran's power plants are struck. Desalination plants were specifically mentioned. And here is why that detail matters more than most people realize. In significant parts of the Gulf, desalination plants are not just industrial facilities. They are where drinking water comes from. When Iran puts desalination plants on the target list, they are not just talking about economics. They are talking about a humanitarian dimension that would change the entire character of this conflict if it were actually executed. The U.S. military has been working to degrade Iran's ability to attack ships in the strait. Admiral Brad Cooper confirmed that U.S. fighter jets had destroyed an underground Iranian coastal facility storing anti-ship cruise missiles. And there has been some degradation of Iranian naval capacity in the Persian Gulf. But here is what I want to share with you as my honest read of this situation. The gap between what is being declared and what is actually happening on the ground has been consistently significant throughout this conflict. Officials declared Iran's navy substantially reduced, and then Iran's conventional navy fired a torpedo in the Indian Ocean, 3,500 miles from the Persian Gulf, in waters that were supposed to be safe. Officials described progress in eliminating Iran's missile capability, and then new Iranian missiles were confirmed to not have been fired yet. The pattern suggests that Iran has been strategically revealing only what it wants the world to see while keeping its real capabilities hidden. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is a documented operational security strategy that military analysts are now openly discussing. What does this mean going forward? In my view, the most likely near-term path is not full-scale escalation into something completely uncontrollable, but it is also not a clean resolution. The more probable scenario is a grinding, painful middle ground. Hormuz stays partially functional but dangerous. Insurance costs for ships remain enormous. Some traffic moves but not enough to normalize prices. Oil stays elevated, somewhere between $100 and $130 a barrel depending on how events unfold, which is where multiple analysts including Capital Economics have placed their projections. American consumers keep paying more at the pump. The Fed stays cautious, and political pressure on both sides builds towards some kind of negotiated off-ramp that nobody fully wants but everyone eventually needs. The Spanish Prime Minister was right when he said we are at a global tipping point. Because this conflict is not just about Iran and Israel or America and Iran, it is about the architecture of global energy supply that the entire world built over 50 years and is now watching get stress-tested in real time. Every country that imports oil, which is most of the world, has a stake in what happens next. The IEA is right that this is the greatest energy security challenge in history, not because the military strikes are unprecedented, but because the specific choke point under pressure, the Strait of Hormuz, is so uniquely irreplaceable. There is no simple alternative. There is no backup waterway. There is no rerouting that does not add massive cost and time and its own risks. Here at Unlocked History Hub, we are going to keep tracking every development as this situation evolves because this story is not close to finished. The 48 hours are up, the ultimatum has expired, and the world is watching to see whether words become actions and what those actions cost everyone who fills up a gas tank, pays a utility bill, or buys anything that got on a ship to reach them. If you found this breakdown useful, if it helped you understand what is actually driving that number at the pump and why the choices being made right now in Washington and Tehran matter to your daily life, drop a comment below and tell me what you think happens next. Do you think Trump follows through on the power plant threat? Do you think Iran backs down or escalates further? I want to hear your read on this because the people watching this channel think seriously about these questions, and your perspective genuinely matters. Share this video with someone who is asking why gas is so expensive right now, but cannot find a clear answer. Because that clear answer is exactly what we tried to give you today. This is Unlocked History Hub. Stay informed, stay sharp, and we will see you in the next one.